Good afternoon, patriots. Actually, I like saying patriots. All Americans that are citizens legally here, in my mind, are patriots if they love the Constitution and love God. So, for everybody out there that's listening, I hope that those two criteria uh, meet my standard for what's an American patriot. So, today is the 25th. It's been a pretty volatile day, to say the least, in the stock market. Today, the market sold off, between 2 and 3% plus because of what took place in Australia with the law. I think that was a main driver. I kind of mentioned it yesterday. Australia was looking at passing a law where the creators of content that used Facebook and used Google would have to pay for the use of that material. Now, keep in mind, a lot of these companies that are worth all this money, they shot up in value because they weren't paying what was fair relative to all the other industries in the country. Somehow they snookered Congress into thinking that they could be able to get away with this indefinitely. And they did for, basically a good part of 10 plus years. And they didn't just get away with it in the United States, they got away with it worldwide. So some of this volatility that we're seeing in the marketplace is tied to these changes that will probably take place in other companies that are also prospering at the expense of our personal information. And so, Christian, how's it going? Is it up?
Sharing now.
Okay, just making sure. So Christian is sharing for me here. Get this feed going. And so, for the four people that have chimed in so far, let me know if you need help. But I need to get it on Telegram.
Yep.
And on Twitter. So one of the things I mentioned yesterday that I wanted to discuss today was, I'm going to put it on the screen here. Okay. Minimum wage and the productivity gap. I'm going to actually need my phone to kind of go through what I wrote yesterday. Keep it real simple. Hold on a second. Oh, you didn't post it.
No, not yet. You did. Sorry.
Okay. So here we go. So let me pull up what I wrote yesterday. I'm going to kind of go through it line by line. So if you go through yesterday afternoon, I wrote about the minimum wage argument for $15. Okay. And I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from people, and I'm not trying to upset anybody. Now, keep in mind, I do believe in capitalism. I have a lot of family that has been in business for themselves for a very long time. And I have some folks that I know in retail as well as the restaurant business. So this is a very sensitive issue to me. And I wouldn't go out making these types of statements without making sure that I can defend my statements, because I'm just going to upset a lot of people that are close to me. And so I want to go step by step about productivity as well as minimum wage and how the two go hand in hand, and frankly, how the two are connected to the United States economy. And so, one second. Okay. Back in 1970, before we went off of the gold standard, the dollar, the minimum wage was $1.60 an hour. Now, the average person would have to work about 67 and a half hours a month to pay for an apartment. So they would have to, work 42% of their time. Now, for any of you that own a home out there, you know that the ratio for the banks is about 28% of your gross income to purchase a home. And then, depending on your overall credit, it could be, I think it can go up to like 35% or so, your total credit. So 42% for someone who's just learning the basic skills of a job wasn't too unreasonable, that you can have your own place, leave your parents' house and go get an apartment, and 40% of your wages would go to get an average size or median apartment back then. And you fast forward to today, since 1970, the productivity in the United States has more than tripled. Okay, so we produce at least 3 times as much as we did back in 1970. So if we're producing $1 or something, the average worker is producing $3 of something. Now, keep in mind that $3 has nothing to do with inflation. This is just pure efficiency. The best way to think about that is if you start to read, or you see it, you have a child and you have a child learning to read or write for the first time. When they first start to read, they go at a pretty slow pace. They're sounding out each word, they're talking, and then all of a sudden, a page that took them 10 minutes to read, they can read it in 3 minutes. So I want you to think of productivity the same way. So it took you 10 minutes to do something, now it takes you 3 minutes to do something. And why does it take you 3 minutes to do it versus 10? Well, because we have computers now. We have cell phones now. We have Google Earth to look at things. We have navigation systems in our car. So we have all these luxuries of life that were just not available back in 1970. I happen to be old enough to remember what it was like before the internet really took off. I know it sounds a little crazy, but the first bulletin boards and using LexisNexis, it was super slow. I'm talking like 1200 baud modems. It took you a while to pull down information. And so as the speed increased, people were able to send photos and videos and all this other stuff. And now you got people, watching me through a stream because of technology. So even though we're 3 times as efficient, the number of hours that somebody has to work for a median apartment in the country, they have to work about 149 hours now. So even though our productivity is basically tripled, the number of hours worked went from basically 67.5 to 149. It's more than doubled. So if you triple something and then you double it, you're paying 1/6, almost approximately 1/6. You've lost 80-something% of your purchasing power, relatively speaking. If that happens, if you stay the same. But obviously, the wages in 1970, they went from $1.60 to today. They're at minimum wage on the federal level is $7.25. Now, keep in mind, I was reading some stuff online. I was looking at the Fed testimony for Monday and Tuesday, or was it Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I saw this number come through, and I'm like, I wonder what minimum wage should look like if I had to compute it from scratch based on the economics and what things cost in terms of hours worked. So this is a super important concept. If you want to get ahead in life, whenever you go to buy something and you want to make sure you really want it, that you're not just wasting your money, think about how many hours you need to work to buy it. So if you go to buy something for $20, but you're a high school student and you make $10 and you pay $1 in taxes, $2 in taxes, you got to work 2.5 hours, you may think twice about buying that $20 item. Maybe you won't, but I'm just telling you that I got into that habit at a very young age to price compare in my mind based on number of hours worked. I remember like the first time that I only had to work, a big thing for me was going to see a movie in the movie theater, and I only had to work a half an hour to see a 2-hour movie. I was really excited about that as a kid. I know it's a little crazy, but nowadays movies, you might have to work 1 full hour, right, to see a movie if you're at minimum wage. And so for me as somebody starting out in the workforce, that was my first barometer of like I was making it. I needed to work half as much to see a movie in the movie theater as a kid. And so that's a good way to think about productivity and efficiency of your labor is if the cost of the things that you want around you are falling. And so if this actually kept up, if the minimum wage in this country kept up with productivity, and even taking into account all the inflation that's taken place, then the minimum wage in this country should be $33. I know it sounds crazy, but if you adjust it, it should be $33 an hour. $33.75, I think, was the number I computed. Now, why is it so low? Why is it only $7? Why do people basically have to work 40 hours a week, 4 weeks in a row, basically? And of the 160 hours they work, only 21 of their hours are theirs. So only about 5.25 hours a week. So I want you to think about that. 5 hours of your entire week are yours. The rest go to rent in this country right now. compared to what it was in 1970. Okay, so this whole thing about the middle class and the poor, the middle class is shrinking and the poor are getting poorer. This is not some hokey pokey idea. It's true. And the data suggests it's true. And the anger out there that we see in our society reflects this reality. It's very accurate that people are upset. I don't think they're unjustified. So the question is, why is this happening? That's the bigger question. Okay, Bob, you're telling us something we already know. Who cares? Why is it happening? Well, I talked about this before with regards to taxes. About 100 years ago, and keep in mind, 1970, that happens to be 51 years ago. So it sounds a little silly, but it's like, wow, 100 years ago, Bobby's talking about 100 years, but 1970 is 50 years ago, and I happen to be 45. So keep in mind, I was just born right after they started screwing everybody and taking us off the gold standard, screwing out Americans, I guess is what I'm saying. And so the reason why it's happening is if the tax grab, if every dollar that you earned before, every dollar you worked, so you worked, if you made $1 100 years ago or so, the federal government took 4 cents. So it was 25 times, you got 25 times as much as the government got. It wasn't a bad deal, right? You have 25 times as much money as the government gets. And if you look across the workforce, employees across the country, that was about the ratio. And then across states and the federal, all the states and cities and taxes, they took 8 cents of every dollar. So you between the two, 12 cents went to federal, state, and local taxes. And you got to keep 88 cents. I want you to imagine that number. You keep 88 cents of whatever you make. That's unbelievable. 88 cents. What would this economy look like if we got to keep 88 cents of what we made? So we went from every dollar we earned, every $8 we earned, we gave 1 to the government. And now every $2.50 we earn, we get to keep $1.50 and give $1 to the government. So before we gave them $1 and we kept 7. Now we give them $1 and we keep $1.50. Let me say that again. We keep $1.50, they get $1. But before we used to get 7, and now we get $1.50. And that is where the minimum wage went. The minimum wage has been literally eaten up by a cancer called the growth of government. And this cancer has been growing for 100 years. And Illinois, I happen to be in Illinois, it's gone horrific. Not only is everything underfunded, so they took all this money from us and they put in these runaway pensions on employees. And they went from 3% taxes and they shot it up, I think, to 5%. They're trying to raise it again and only penalize the rich, and they'll give me, but that's a different conversation about wealth. But keep in mind, the guy that spent all this money of his own money to try to get a surtax on the rich, his family made all their money by offshoring their wealth. This guy called JB. And JB offshored all his money into his dad, I guess, or maybe his grandfather. Their family, the Pritzker family, made all this money until the U.S. Congress changed the loophole, I think, in the 1960s. Somehow this guy still managed to get elected because I think he spent $200 million going across the state of Illinois, just paying up everything, helping everybody out. I'm Santa Claus here. I'm going to just go and pay everybody to help me win and become governor. Now, keep in mind, he inherited all his money. Both his parents died pretty young. And so this guy, he inherited billions of dollars, $2-3 billion. And he didn't do any of the work to make any of it. And so why am I telling you this? Because what's been happening in this country with this creep of this theft on the government is taking place because of people that didn't deserve to be in power. They didn't have the intelligence. They didn't have the work ethic. They literally bought themselves into the spot. And right now, I happen to, while we're on this wages and productivity thing, there's people running for Congress where we have very perverse incentives. They have people raise money for them, and they don't care if they're going to win. If they're likable, they're going to raise money for them because they get a nice cut. So think of it as like a marketing fee. Okay. I can't stand that system. I understand why it exists, but I think it's horseshit. We, the people, defend the public airwaves. All viable candidates, as far as I'm concerned, our military protects our airwaves. Our Space Force protects our airwaves. We should have anybody who's qualified and did all the things to run for office. They should have public airtime. As far as I'm concerned, we're paying the freight. So the fact that we have to pay for our own elected officials to have to go raise money from people that then they're beholden to them is just an absolute outrage, in my opinion. But getting back to this $15, so if you make $7.25, and Illinois is a little different, I think the minimum wage has gone up, and you make $7.25, or you make $10 an hour, and you have to work 100 hours to pay for your rent, or 110 hours, and that's why 160 hours in 4 work weeks minus 110, you get to keep 50 hours of your work, so you get to keep $500. Yeah, keep in mind, I'm not taking into account taxes. You might have to work more than those numbers I just told you about. I'm just making the assumption that's right now, just to keep it simple, that's you get to keep every penny. So in fact, most Americans, once you pay the taxes on that 160 hours of work, you literally are just paying to have just a roof over your head. And then you wonder why people charge their credit card. They get credit. So the system's set up to say, hey, don't worry about it. You don't have the money. Maybe you'll make more than minimum wage. Maybe you'll get a second job. And we'll just front you all the money right now. You're going to get into debt, and we're going to charge you 20%, even though the Federal Reserve is charging us 0 for the money. Why? Because you're going to probably not be able to pay it back. But we'll keep making that 20% for the people that do pay it back. And this is the game. So this is why you should try to avoid credit cards at all costs. You should try to buy things only if you can afford it. And you should try to look at things from the standpoint of, okay, well, how do I get there? How do I make this work, Bobby? I need to understand, what do I need to do to get out of this debt trap that they put our society in? And so that's some of the stuff that I'm working on. But now I want to specifically talk to productivity now, and how it relates to minimum wage in businesses. So I want you to imagine that most retailers and restaurants, an employee gets about, in the restaurant business, is about 30 cents on the dollar is what they get in terms of the revenue. So if somebody wants to make $30,000 in the restaurant business as an employee, they need to generate about $100,000 in sales. That's just the way the costs work out. Everybody thinks the restaurant's making a bunch of money. No, if they make $100,000, they got to pay their employees 30. They got to pay taxes. They got to pay rent. They got to pay insurance. They got to pay liquor license. They got to pay food costs. Food costs might be another 25, 30%, depending on the restaurant, maybe even higher. And then after doing all that, if they're lucky, they'll make 3 to 5 cents. So they get 3 to 5 cents is what's left for them. Now, I want you to remember, let's just say it's a nickel. So every $100,000 a restaurant rings up in sales, they make $5,000. Not during this whole COVID thing, by the way. This is under normal circumstances. So if they make $5,000 and minimum wage goes up by $1, it goes up 10%. So it goes from $10 to $11, for example, I think in Illinois. So now the cost structure of that business just went up by what? Went up by $3,000. So it went up by 10%. It went from $30,000 to $33,000. Now the business has a choice. It has to either go from making $5,000 a year to making $2,000 if it doesn't raise price, or it has to increase the number of the price of all the food that it sells by 3% to stay even. It has to up it by 3% because its labor went up by 10%. Okay, because it went from $10 to $11. Or the other thing it can do is it could say, you know what, we're going to adjust and use fewer hours with technology. And so that's, if you noticed, you go to McDonald's, they have kiosks now. You don't have to go into the store and have somebody ring you out. Now you can order food through your app. You can, and once again, this is a productivity increase. So then you might be saying, Bobby, what do we do? All these people that used to sit at the register and ring people out. You go to Target now, you see the same thing. Now you have one person watching while 6 people are ringing out. That's a massive productivity increase. So even if there's a little bit of theft, and most people are honest, so there isn't that much theft, but they have cameras to help keep that in check, it's a huge home run from the standpoint of productivity. So then those wages going to $15 an hour at Walmart or at Target or at McDonald's, that makes a tremendous amount of sense to do it immediately, I would say, because they've already rolled out the technology. They had the budgets to do it. Now, I do believe, just like there's in banking, there's credit limits. Like, no bank is supposed to be too big to fail. So they have different tiers of capital. And then from those tiers of capital, the government decides, what the reserve requirements are so that the bank can absorb the losses. Well, I think we should have minimum wage for certain size companies. We should make the big corporations who got bailed out and who were able to stay open raise prices. They should have higher wages. Okay. Now you might say, Bobby, if I do that, they're going to steal all my talent, right? Because they're going to be able to pay $15. I can only pay 10. They're going to have an advantage. Okay. And, there's a little bit of truth to that you're going to lose some people. But the other part of the equation is you might be able to have slightly different prices, and you might be able to, get a workforce where you say, I can't pay you 15. You're not productive yet. So what I can do is you can be trained as an apprentice, and let's just say an apprentice cook at a restaurant. You're not getting paid like a line cook at $15 an hour, $16 an hour. You want to learn how to cook, you get paid 12. And so there's ways that this can be worked out based on systems that have worked in the past. For hundreds of years, there used to be an apprenticeship type of program in a lot of professions. It was in law, it was in finance, it was in retail, it was in, whatever, on farms. I'm sure people used to just work to eat and have a place to sleep until they learned how to work. And this is the way part of this problem can be solved. The other way that it can be, partially be solved is if it's a gradual process and it's stepped in, that businesses take the time to dissect their financial statements and make the adjustments to where their employees are 10% more efficient per hour. Now, it sounds daunting because one way to do that is you got to get 36 hours of work, pay them for 36 hours before you had them working for 40. You look at your revenue per hour that they're there. You look at you look at your cost structure per hour. Where can you cut your costs? You look at adding services. You look at maybe better customer service. Maybe some of your employees become telemarketers. Maybe instead of sitting around at the counter or in your business, you get them on the phone and call to see how your customers are doing. This is how you offset some of these increases in minimum wage, because the technology is there for every employee to deserve to make at least $15 an hour. The other thing that businesses can do, they theoretically should be making a lot more than that, but they can't make the $25 or $30 an hour as minimum wage as they should, based on where we are technologically in society and where we've come, without we, the people, getting to work and shrinking the size of government. If we take the time to vote in the right politicians and shrink government, take it from instead of the government getting $1, we get $1.50 overall. Let's just, we'll ease into it like they're doing with these minimum wage increases. You say, we're okay. We're going to start paying our employees an extra $1 an hour, but instead of raising prices 2%, we want our tax rate to be cut 1%. So instead of a 2% increase, we're going to go 1%. So how do we do that? We need to cut the size of the government by 5%. We need to cut it. Why? The productivity is there, people. How is it that the whole economy got more efficient for 50 years straight, but the number of people and the inefficiency of the government kept getting worse the entire time? And that government workers used to make about 75 to 80 cents per hour worked relative to the private market, because they tended to be the individuals that just didn't have as much in training and they wanted more job security than the private market. And now government workers get a premium. So if you want to know why you as a small business in America can't pay your staff, a higher wage, that looks as though it's more appropriate given where we've come as a nation, it's not what you're doing wrong as a business. It's what we are all doing wrong as citizens. We did not do the math. We have to start doing the math on all these things. We need to look at what the property taxes are on a per square foot basis, on a per day basis for our business. And we need to look at what it used to be as a relative to our sales. And then you need to go and talk to other business owners at your, when you join like the business community. Each town tends to have like a business, what do they call it? Help me out, folks. I don't have the thing up with the comments, but where you have like you have a chamber of commerce. That's what it is. When you have a chamber of commerce and everybody just swaps data and says, you know what, this is what it's costing me in taxes per square foot. What do you guys think? Is this fair? Oh, by the way, you know what, Bobby, we're looking at this county here. These other 15 counties in Illinois surrounding us, or they're paying about 20% less. Oh, let's pick up the phone and find out what they're doing differently. Why is their government that much more efficient than ours? And then, that's the way we bring it back. We don't do it overnight. We chip away at it the same way they chipped away at us for 50 years. We just grind it down. And then when artificial intelligence kicks in, and more in terms of we as this artificial intelligence gets built out, robotics kicks in, not a problem. We put a freeze on all new government hires of the future, and we let them retire out and replace them with robots. Period. That's the way you do it. If you want to do it, shrink the size of the government by using all these awesome technologies that are going to drive productivity gains for us in this nation, and use them first on the government sector to shrink the size of government. You don't screw everybody that's working at the government right now. I'm not suggesting that. But what you do is you slow the pace of anybody entering government. You still need some replacement, but then you wean us back down. It's like a drug habit. Right now, we have a bizarre drug habit. Most drug habits that people have, they get something out of it. They get a high, they feel good, they feel loopy, whatever. The only thing I like to do is I like to drink a little bit of alcohol every once in a while. So I can't speak to what drugs feel like. I have no interest in trying any of them. I never have, and I have no interest of ever doing it. I've never wanted to damage my mind. I used to tell my some of the wealthy friends in college that wanted me to try different drugs. I would be like, look, man, I can't afford to damage my mind. I don't have a rich dad. So I got to do the work myself. And since that's the case, I'm not willing to risk damaging my brain. And so, anyways, going back to this whole concept with regards to shrinking the size of the government, absorbing these increases in wages. The other thing we can do as a society, the size of the government should move up and down based on what's going on in the economy. If the economy shrinks by 10% because of some virus hitting us, we should shrink all government spending, all the salaries of all government workers, everybody across the board, minimum 10%, cut them all. They should feel the pain of the people paying the bill. So when business owners and everybody else weren't able to open up, no problem. You guys are all getting a cut in your payroll as well. You should not continue to get paid while everybody else who's paying the bill has to take a cut. And that's what we should have done. That's what we need to do going forward. They want to do lockdowns. They should get penalized twice as much. So if the average American worker drops 10% in a particular state or county, and the income of that whole group of people went down 10%, all government workers should see a 20% fall. Why? Because they screwed up. They didn't make sure that we were prepared for this stuff to begin with. And that will create the right set of incentives to make sure that this never happens again. So with that, I hope that you find it a little bit helpful. If you are a business and you're trying to deal with the minimum wage increases, sign up for my newsletter. I'll probably try to put something together and write this up, maybe like a 3-5 page write-up of different ways you can look at your cost structure. Maybe I'll do like a retail example. Maybe I'll do like a restaurant example. I know all these ratios pretty well. I know how to construct it from the income statement, balance sheet side, cash flow statement side of things. And first of all, I'm not asking, if I share this information, it's education only. You're not my client. I'm not asking you to pay me anything. You assume all risk. Let me say it again. If you use what I say, assume it's wrong and go check with some other people that may understand it or know it's right, if it's right. Okay? Just assume what I show you might have some errors. There's some problems. You need to fix it. Okay? So think of it as like a problem on the test, but I'll at least help give the frameworks away and let people deal with the frameworks and some of the ideas. Think of it as just the suggestion box. You don't have to use it, but you got to remember, I'm in a very heavily regulated industry. I do not want to personally take responsibility because I'm not getting paid to take that responsibility, and I'm not in the mood to get sued for somebody misusing what I said. So I have to give you that disclaimer. We live in that kind of society right now. There's some people that sign up for my mailing list, and then when I sent them an email, they said that I was spamming them. So yes, it sucks that happens. Does that mean I'm going to stop doing it? Absolutely not, because there's always going to be jerks everywhere, and we have to just move past the jerks and do what's right and what's fair for other people. So I will keep trying to get the word out and help people everywhere I can, and even if that means there's some people that don't treat me fairly in the process. So with that, on a lighter note, God bless you. God bless your family and friends. May God continue to bless the United States of America. I hope that peace finds you and finds you. And if you don't have peace right now, that peace of mind, peace of spirit of where you think you should be, I hope that you do find it. I will be posting another video of this crypto stuff that I talked about. Hopefully, I'll get that out shortly. And then in about 8:30, a little over 3 hours from now, I got to get caught up. I think I'm on day 5 of 365 with just kind of going over the Bible. I think it's super cool. I'm learning a lot from the Bible that I haven't learned before because I never really studied it. I always kind of show up to mass, and just like a lot of people, and you listen, and sometimes you zone out maybe a little bit. I'm not saying I did that all the time, but when you sit down and read it and think about it, there's a lot of incredible stuff just about common sense and great life lessons to be a little kinder, to be a little more helpful, to be happy, and just good stories and rules of thumb for how to live a very happy and successful life. So I hope you consider reading it, even if you're not religious. Just read it as though it's an academic paper, and I think you'll get a lot out of it, and maybe you'll get a lot more than that as well. So peace be with everybody. Thank you.